had, only with more controls and more wealth in the 1% and less with the rest of us. So what do we do? I mean, that's the big question. I will share that last winter I read a book by Guy Dauncey, and it's called Journey to the Future. And there's an extensive amount of information in there in a novel format about what creating a new economy looks like. And there's a lot of tools there for the local, regional, provincial, and federal levels of government. And so as all of us sitting here as elected officials or working in the nonprofit, we don't have to reinvent all these wheels, but right now it seems pretty overwhelming for our communities, because we see how our taxpayers going to pay their municipal taxes, and how are our businesses going to pay municipal taxes, and we have no other forms of revenue really. So we're on the front lines of this and trying to adapt to all the different crises that are on the ground in our communities. So it's really a shit show, and I don't know how to do this other than might not be a bad idea to pick up that book and read it again, and pick one idea and just start going for it. But individually, we don't want to tackle all these things piecemeal either. We want to have a plan, and I don't know, that's kind of how I would start my part of this conversation.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And as it happens, I'm on a board of a nonprofit with Guy Dauncey, so we're part of what's called the Yellow Point Ecological Society, up just behind the Nanaimo Airport. So as it happens too, and this can definitely lead to other conversations. We at Yellow Point, we've picked up Zoom as well, and we're going to use it for our board meetings and that kind of stuff. But talking about the economics is so. Following Guy's work about the his economic plan, so he's done a huge amount of writing right now. Hasn't looked at it in the point of the coronavirus, which he might go back and revisit, but he has a whole bunch of ideas, and he's formulated and written this all down. So he's working on it to publish another book about what could these new economies look like. He was involved with the Site C dam and was writing about the economics there and doing some detailed analysis. So he's got some other stuff, and so as a future point, and we probably need to bring him into the conversation too, and then just let him start laying some of these solutions out, because it's going to be, it can't be one solution. There's got to be many different solutions, and how the economy is going to have to work, and there's going to need to be an online community, that people will be able to work from home, but then that there's all kinds of knowledge-based jobs that can happen out here too, that with people at home, and that's an economy too, because that knowledge economy is important. I mean, that's why the people like Google's and everybody else know what we're doing on the internet, because that knowledge, that information, that data is money, is power, creates revenue, creates business, all kinds of stuff. So that's some of the thinking that needs to occur around this too. And like as Rick was mentioning, maybe IOUs, but I think that there's going to have to be a really big discussion about how we handle these, the changes to the economy, and how we drive the economy. And there's a place for manufacturing, there's a place for knowledge, there's a place for services to people, and we're going to have to really think this through carefully. But we're also going to have to move quickly, I think, too. That we can't be deliberating on this for a year. We're going to have to make some really big changes, I think. So so more people have come online. I'm going to be hosting this discussion about economics. I have some ideas, but I'm not an expert. But Rick will pop in later on when he gets a chance. He's gone to an emergency council meeting and stuff. But maybe we can just go around and introduce everybody where you are, and maybe just see some of the issues you're seeing cropping up. So maybe Anne has started. I'm also recording this too, so because just to have all this as a record of what we've said, and go back and listen to it as well too. But so I know Anne is. Anne, you didn't actually say where you were from, and I don't think I remember exactly the second. But do you want to say where you're from again?
Yeah, thanks. I'm from a tiny municipality. I'm a councillor in the district of Highlands. It's just outside Victoria, BC.
Right. Good. Perfect. Okay. And then Murray was from North Saanich, right? Good. And then Alyssa, where are you from?
Hi, I am the manager of the Canadian Collaboration for Sustainable Procurement.
Yeah.
So we work with a lot of municipalities and public sector folks to brainstorm and create tools to activate things like green procurement, social procurement, indigenous procurement. So I'm here to offer support and ideas when it comes to how you spend your budgets for response efforts, and how we can buy from local social enterprises, from diverse suppliers, etc., to make sure that the money is going to those who can use it the most.
And who are probably going to be driving the economy, right? Because that's where small business, small mom and pop operations are, where a majority of this is going to need to be thought about, and what's going to actually drive the economy too. So that's, no, it's really good.
Exactly.
And Andrea, yes.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Sunshine Coast Regional District. I'm a director there, and yeah, it's I'm interested to hear, but also I guess maybe to brainstorm as to where things might be headed. We certainly have, you know, being sort of insular in our economy as well. We're very dependent right now, and we don't have a lot of food growing happening here on the coast. So there's a lot of things that we can do to make our economy here more resilient, and I'm hoping that something like this might actually shake people up and go, hey, maybe we need to do something about this.
So sorry to interrupt. Whoever's got music going in the background, could you mute the mic, please? Or
done, Eric. Our apologies.
Thank you. Thank you. But no, that's really, and I mean, in the Sunshine Coast too, involved with forests and forestry, and you know, what are these? There has to be other opportunities too out there to diversify the economy too. So it's about economic sectors that are available, and people where they're located, and using technology in the online world too. So that's good. Casta.
Yeah, I'm Casda Thomas. I'm a counselor in the town of Smithers, and it's a small community in northern BC. We have about 5,500 residents, and we serve a regional area of about 15,000 people. Yeah, so I'm just really interested in this conversation. It's happening already within our community. Lots of people talking about food security, as well as other things. So happy to be here with you folks.
Yeah, that's good. Perfect. Thank you. And George.
Hi there, George Benson in Vancouver. I work for the City of Vancouver's Economic Development Agency, the Vancouver Economic Commission, and just excited to be here and listen in on some of the economic recovery ideas that are being talked about in communities across BC. Thanks for having me.
Cool. And then maybe from a municipality point of view too, then you could have bring some ideas forward of what you're thinking about from a municipality point of view too, because that's where I think a lot of the rubber is going to hit the road at the municipality level. So then that's going to be some important to share your thinking and views of where potentially economies can go as well. So that's good. And Ted, please.
Hi, folks. George, I just sent you an email, a private email, asking you about you and Jeremy Rifkin that I think it was last year or the year before that kind of formed some kind of a association relationship. And of course, Jeremy Rifkin, amongst other things, is very big on the Green Deal coming out of Europe, etc. So there's certainly part of the potential fabric of solutions going forward. But part of this, as Adam, you'll remember our food security discussion from 11 to 12 this morning, and Erica, you as well, talked about kind of the short term or the immediate, dividing that up from the long term. But sorry, Ted Sheldon here, retired provincial government employee, primarily with Climate Action Secretariat and Clean Energy Groups, kind of dividing my administrative environment, dividing my career time, now an associate fellow up at the Center for Global Studies out at the University of Victoria, involved with local initiatives, be it circular economy, One Planet Saanich, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so issues, I'd love to hear more from Melissa, obviously, on procurement. I think that's tremendously important given the leverage power that all levels of government have. Circular economy, or the National Industrial Symbiosis Project internationally, is a similarly related topic. Renewables and smart grids and more independent grids and whatnot, as far as energy security is concerned. Lots of opportunities there, but I'm a jack of a few trades and a master of absolutely none. So just here to see if I can help.
Cool, thank you. And Adam, please.
Yes, hello, Adam Sutherland. I live outside of Nelson on Kootenai Lake in BC. And I'm retired engineer and not a counselor, but I'm here to support. And I actually do take care of the community water system that we have here with 60 households where I live.
Sorry, 50?
60.
60, yeah, yeah. I mean, so super important for those 60 people, and small on the big scale of things like compared to Vancouver's or New York City's, but it's still important and a super important building block.
That's right. There's infrastructure to take care of and maintain.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
Ben, please.
Mute myself here. Good afternoon, everyone. Ben Gesselbrock. I'm a counselor with the city of Nanaimo, and I'm also on the UBCM executive, and I'm on the Economic Development Committee for that. But just really interested in sort of, anticipating what is going to happen economically and being able to position municipalities in a good way, and also advocate when the provincial and federal government are making decisions on how they're going to support the economic difficulties, advocate for things that are good for the municipalities, and redistribute resources.
Okay, that's good. And I'm just trying to see that there's a few more people on here too. And so I want to see who have I got here too. So then we've got Megan as well too from North Vancouver, I believe, right, Megan?
Hi, everybody. Yep, I'm a counselor in the District of North Vancouver. I've been working for a while to dismantle oppressive power structures and systems, which is what we're living in. So this is kind of my wheelhouse. But in the short term, obviously we're dealing with incoming emails from residents and business owners saying, are you going to drop our property taxes? Trying to figure out if we're going to extend tax breaks to businesses that rent from, like, a lot of emergent immediate needs, and then trying to weave that into dismantling this hellscape that we live in.
Cool. Thank you, Megan. And Mita.
Hi, let me just turn my video on so you can see me. Hello.
Hi.
I live on Laskiti Island. I am a leadership candidate for the Green Party of Canada and their past science innovation critic. And I've also just started a nonprofit that is looking into policy around sustainable economy as well as decolonized governance. So I'm here to listen, but also happy to add any thoughts on that as I'm putting together with my team, or two teams, thoughts on frameworks for a sustainable and hopefully equitable and just future.
Cool, thank you. And I see also Freshwater Alliance.
Hey folks, my name's Corey here. I'll turn my video on. My internet's a little bit spotty right now, so that's why I'm keeping my video off. But my name's Corey Tull. I'm the organizing director with the Canadian Freshwater Alliance, and I'm based in Vancouver. And I just wanted to join the call and listen in and share where I can. One of the big projects that the Alliance that we're working on is around a watershed security fund, which ultimately invests back into local communities, really looking at the value of natural assets, as well as sort of more broad-based investments and benefits to the community's local economies and ultimately watersheds through economic development, reconciliation, and employment, rural employment. And so curious just to hear where you folks are at, obviously with the current situation, and interested in, future opportunities to be able to look at how we're investing in our communities through a natural assets lens.
Cool, thank you. Okay, is there anybody else I think that's everybody, isn't it? That's about 13 of us, so that's good. But it looks like already that we're talking about some local scale, the small people. I mean, a lot of cases, the economic wealth, let's say, or the profits head offshore, or we drive other economies. You think about trees that we're raw log exporting, so then we're driving the economy of China. We're not driving our local economy, or the provincial government giving out contracts for for the ferries to Germany, so we're driving the German economy, not ours. And if we drive our local economies, I think that there's something like a 3-time multiplier. If those dollars stay in the local community, that we actually drive our own community and make possibilities locally. So there's a whole bunch of levels that we need to sort of think about where these economies are and how they function, and to make sure that as much money stays in the local community, drives it, as opposed to driving other economies, because we still will drive the other economies by default, I guess, or well, through trade, through those interactions, we will help drive other economies, but we have to make sure our own, and by doing it locally, we're going to make sure that we have, it ends up being national security too, because if we're driving our own local economy, we're going to be able to make ourselves secure in many fashions and still not being reliant on foreign countries or foreign companies to provide some sort of security, provide those products back to us. And we were talking about that in the food security issues this morning too, about difficulties with seeds, that people had to go already out of North America to go get seed to bring that back, and we're having supply issues too. So and having more local control over the economy and the supply of goods and the demand for goods and services, then I think just makes us much more secure. But what does everybody think? Like I guess the first big question is, do we think that is the economy going forward, like the capitalist system, right? Like there's really good models in Europe where there's sort of a balance of socialist systems and capitalist systems, but do we all think that the economy the way it is can go forward the way it is? And Andrea raised his hand.
Yeah, gonna unmute myself. Yeah. Here are just some thoughts that I've got. Ultimately, you know, those companies that are, whether they're small businesses that are local, or whether they're large businesses that are multinational, those that don't have, that were on the brink or struggling, they're going to probably not going to make it through this crisis unless there's some sort of large scale intervention from governments. And that I think leaves some voids as well as some opportunities, but it might also really create some destitute people, and especially if some of those bigger companies fold. You know, there's some whole towns. You know, you look at Boeing in Seattle, and you know, those kind of companies that are really too big to fail. That could really, you know, create some real havoc. But on the other hand, I think there is some opportunity to maybe rethink some of our globalization, as well as our the way that today's economy is headed. It's quite fragile when you're looking at something that it does affect the planet, like a pandemic. But overall, there's also some stability in you know, spreading out your manufacturing and all that. Right now, there's a lot of it centralized in China. So you know, there's right now, you know, I don't think we have a magic magic ball where we can see everything, but I think there's certainly there's some things that are going to shake up out of this, and right now I don't feel like I've got a grasp on where it's headed.
Right, but would people think that getting money, like these sort of assistance, I mean, realistically, it is our money that has gone to the province and to the federal governments too. So, but to be very strategic with that, because we see, like say the bailout for the banking bailout in 2008 and 9, where the money went directly into the banks, but they kept on their massive profits and their massive management, what do you call it? Management, you know, payment packages that, and it went to bonuses and all kinds of silly things that didn't actually drive the company. Like it went, I mean, the economy, it went into the bank and went into business as usual and didn't actually do anything. Like we need to get money, any kind of these assistance programs or bridging or whatever you want to call it has to get to the hands of the people, where, and the people is where the economy is. It's in low and middle classes, and it's not in the 1% or any of that kind of stuff, or these corporations. And for example too, like corporations even in Canada and definitely in the US and other places, like they don't pay taxes too, right? So they're using all the resources and they do pay wages, but they aren't paying taxes as part of the system too. Like in places like Finland, it's on a percentage basis. So it's all relative based on your income. So if you get a speeding ticket, then whatever your income is, you're paying whatever the percentage is. So you were paying 10%, 12%, and that's the speeding ticket. But somebody else who makes less income will pay the same percentage, but it'll be less cost based on that type of stuff. So that would be some of the suggestions too. Like there's so many loopholes for people to not pay taxes or move it offshore into these tax havens that we've seen, that there has to be these opportunities to get money into the hands of the people, because the people are the economy. But right now the money is short circuiting and going to the top. I mean, I don't know what people think about that.
I think we need to ensure that all of these bailouts don't go to the large corporations, that they go into the hands of the people. And is there a role for the Climate Caucus to lobby for that on our behalf? Because if our individual community members have their basic human needs covered, then we're far more able to maintain civil society and actually create something that is equitable, and at the same time we're addressing the climate crisis through less consumption and relocalizing our economies. But could this be an opportunity to start having a more meaningful conversation on the guaranteed minimum income carrying forward, and not just the short-term buyout during this particular economic crisis?
Go ahead, George.
Oh, thanks. I guess just to help me understand the kind of the scope of this conversation, I guess we're just sort of laying out some general ideas first here, but is the intention of this call to really focus in on, I think it's the $85 billion stimulus or $82 billion stimulus the government of Canada's announced, or is it to focus on the $5 billion the province has announced, and it sounds like perhaps to advocate around how that money should be spent? I'm just trying to understand what the scope of the conversation is, because I think if we're talking about federal policy, provincial spending, et cetera, there's lots of different ways to slice that. So just helping me, I think, maybe catch up to where you folks are headed in this conversation would be helpful.
Right. Like I would say it's definitely those conversations too, but then that's just in the short term. So what's in the medium term and the long term? Like, do we want to see the economy stay the same way, or what can it be? And with the umbrella or under the umbrella of the Climate Caucus too, like, so what is that we want to see happen, like natural asset management, and companies are always going to try and make profits because that's part of their thing, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because that drives innovation, but how it's now been structured for many years. So I think there's a lot of different sort of conversations, short, medium, and long term, and we can definitely talk about the federal and the provincial bailout packages, but 82 billion and $5 billion is literally a drop in the bucket compared to the economic engines that have been out there going now until now, that basically we've shut down because everybody's staying at home and just essential services are going. So there's multiple lanes of conversations, and I think we need to work on some of that, but also the views of where do we see the economy after this, I think is some important stuff. But George, do you want to talk about those bailout packages in particular, and then we'll head to Murray. But do you want to discuss that since you brought that topic up?
Sure. I guess just in terms of, again, framing the conversation for myself, there's a great article that I can put in the chat here from The Logic, which details is a bit of a run through of kind of the laundry list of what's implicated in the the federal package, and then the province. I can find a link to the press release and send it there as well, that just sort of goes through the line items there. I guess I'm just trying to understand what the kind of the lever of advocacy or the direction folks are looking to take this in. To me, there's some good stuff in those packages. There's definitely some bad stuff in those. I think a lot of the oil and gas sector bailouts that are, I think, set to be announced today or tomorrow are very, very troubling. But I don't have a sense yet of the full scope even of the future announcements there. So I guess I'm curious if folks see an opportunity to, one, change the scope of what's already been announced in those two separate provincial federal packages. And then, as you say, trying to understand what the game plan is going forward after that, because the province, for example, said they want to leave $1.5 billion in a reserve fund for economic recovery once they feel the crisis has sort of subsided a little bit. So, the question might be, what is the CLC strategy for going after that 1.5 billion, and what are the uses and populations that money might want to be directed to? So that's kind of the question. I'm just trying to wrap my head around a little bit there. But there's so much that could be covered in each of those. But those are just, I guess, some details, and I'll find the provincial announcement as well to give some more details there. But yeah, just trying to get, like I say, trying to scope myself in as to where people see the opportunity.
Right. And so this is good because, I mean, this is, I think, maybe some of the first discussions about sort of the economic possibilities too. And definitely, I think we need to tap into people like Guy Dauncey and other places too. But I saw Murray had a question, and then Ben and Adam as well. So
yeah, look, we all, from those of us who are counselors, we all have staffs who are the people who are going to be writing the grants and those kinds of things. So from my perspective, that's covered by well-paid professionals to get that kind of thing happening. And in terms of the emergency, most of counselors are somewhat remote from that too, because we do again have, once you declare an emergency, you've got staff who are running that, and quite frankly, for counselors to show up and get involved there, all we're going to do is get in the way. So, but we do have to look at things going forward. Now, in terms of us having an effect on what's going to happen in the next short while, that's just not how lobbying and those kinds of things work. So if anything that's going to be decided in the next, month or 2 months, we're going to have a real difficult time having much effect on, at least in my opinion. So, it's where do we go from here? If I think back to my youth, my past, walking through East Vancouver to Whitecaps game when they played at the Empire Stadium, and you walk by garden after garden after garden, with Italians having done all this stuff. That's the kind of things I think we have to recreate in the short term, if especially if this virus thing doesn't get looked after in some kind of way. So I'm not so much looking ahead into what are going to take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years to do. I'm at this time more short-term focused. Thanks.
yeah, no, that's good, because I mean, we definitely need to think long-term and short-term, and those municipalities then, to those bailout packages that Ben was mentioning too. Well, then we need to be sort of see if we can find out what is needed at the local level, but then start pushing the province and the feds and just sort of helping them move in, because there's going to have to be more packages coming. So with a bailout of the oil and gas sector is just, they don't need any help, and oil and gas are tanking, and coal is tanking as well too. So those billions of dollars already should be going elsewhere, I think, and that's some of the local conversations that we need to have from local municipalities and the people, and start creating our vision of what is it that we really want out of this thing, and to have these short, medium, and long-term discussions. And Murray, you mentioned about the emergency management setup, and the bureaucrats or the people in there are going to be running the show, but also too, we need to be having those discussions and the local people discussing what is it that they really want, like to make sure that these economies are going to be meeting lots and lots of needs, and bringing forward social justice, environmental justice, and making the economy work for everybody, not just a few of them. So, but over to Ben and then to Adam. Okay.
Good. Thanks. Just building on some comments made there by George, just on the scoping this conversation and where we're going. I think it's early times in terms of this group meeting to sort of see where we're going to land, and I definitely find it useful just to hear from each person sort of how they're looking at sort of when we say it, economy, how they're looking at what from their context around that. There's definitely, for myself, there's different timelines. Like there's a short-term impacts and sort of what our municipality can do to sort of help all the businesses that are in trouble, homeless folks right now, and yeah, like even internally right now in our municipality, we're starting to have to look at laying off individuals that aren't working, and so there's like quite immediate issues. And then the other thing what I mentioned is I think that there is I think that we are going to face quite a dramatic economic downturn, and there is the financial and monetary policy is I'm just learning a bit more and more about it, but I think that it's going to have a huge impact on municipalities, and the education around what can we advocate for is not well known. And I think there are going to be decisions on what's been mentioned before, like how this economic stimulus is going to happen. Are we just going to pump money in through the Federal Reserve, or are they going to look at debt restructuring and be able to help out people, getting money directly to them in terms of mortgages and rents? And I think it is going to be on the municipalities to come out strong to advocate for that within the next, I would say it'd be like a 6-month period. And I think that we do have opportunity. Like I know, like through the UBCM, the CEO of the UBCM is meeting regularly with the provincial Minister of Municipal Affairs and Finance. And so even in the short term, we could be coming up with ideas and letting them know, like, hey, this is what we think is important, and they'll be having these conversations in the next 2 weeks. So I think there is a window for advocacy, but that's sort of how I'm looking at things in my context right now.
Okay, and also too, like the central banks, they can actually, because it's not tied to the gold standard anymore, that the central banks can actually put money into the economy, like we saw the central bank do in the US, that they were able to, they put in that 1.5 trillion into the stock market, in the wrong place to put it. But so this deficit financing is a way to get us to, like FDR did this in the States in the 1930s, went out and created these massive big projects and used the money, the power of the US federal government then and the Federal Reserve to fund this. So there is a way with the central banks can actually print money and push it into the economy. And that's one of the ways we're gonna have to do it a lot more strategically too. So, but anyway, we need to get to Adam next. And then Megan had her hand up as well.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief, but I would say the Climate Caucus goal really is to focus at the municipal level, and certainly we have interest in influencing provincial, but it's really focused on ensuring that we have healthy cities. And I would say in the short term, as I've heard, there's potentially a cash flow problem if there isn't revenue coming in. And so one thing I might observe is that we really want to make sure our credit unions are solvent and in good shape. So when we talk about supporting things, we should look at ensuring that at the local level. So that's I would say longer term, if we're looking at infrastructure, and really with climate change, we should be reorienting the transportation systems as well as the energy systems. And one topic which probably would be controversial and would be nationalizing the transportation system. I know that could be quite controversial, but but that's I would put that out there. And I'll leave it at that.
And there was just, I had just another thought of too, what Ben was saying too about local municipalities having to lay off workers too. Well, then that is sort of counterintuitive thinking too, because we need the local municipalities to keep making sure that the water is flowing and the sewers are going and clean up and pick up and those types of things too. So that's almost counterintuitive and productive at the same time as well too, because that at the local level, because if all that shuts down and you talk about power utilities and on it extends out. So the basic services that we need, so we need power, we need water, we need sewer taken away, and we need all those to function at the very least. Like we don't need, well, I mean, there's so many things we probably don't need, that we don't need planning right now. But I mean, anyway, everybody's important and everybody needs to be having a different lens on this too. So that's really important. A really good thinking that we need to make sure that the money is getting into the right hands to keep the economy driving. And like, therest a friend of mine in Semanis that has a a small store. Well, they've had to shut down the store now. I don't know if they're going to make their hydro or their rent payments for that store, and now they've gone to an online store. So those kind of people need help too. You know, this disconnect yet need to still be connected kind of system is making it really interesting of what we're going to have to come up with. So Megan had her hand up. Go.
Yeah, so just putting on my communications hat for a second, George, it would be awesome to potentially connect offline, but I think it is, from Climate Caucus perspective, really important to understand so that we can actually come out and critique some of those federal and provincial policies from a Climate Caucus lens and say, these are problematic for these reasons, and really decimate that, get that message out through Climate Caucus, because I think that that's really helpful for people to understand. And right now is not the time when people are unpacking necessarily, because we're dealing with the acuteness of what's happening. So I think that would be awesome for one thing. And then we have a real opportunity at the local government level. It's very clear to people when they pay taxes at a local level what they expect those taxes to be used for, right? Like the rec centers and the roads and all of these things. And so if we can frame the conversation around these bailouts, like sort of make this connection, like if we just said, we're gonna take all of your money and we're gonna give it to this person, are cool? And I think that people would may potentially start to understand how absurd that sort of what's happening. And on a local level, I certainly understand, you know, we have probably 1,000 full and part-time workers for our rec, just aside from our municipality as our North Van Rec Commission. So these are all of our rec centers and cultural facilities. So layoffs are potentially coming, but how do we look at what would be better for those employees to be doing? So a lot of the things that the Green New Deal and different things sort of envision, I think we have an opportunity to implement quickly at a local scale. So I'm really interested in hearing from other people and exploring some of those possibilities, because we can move quickly.
Okay, and I do see hands up from Alyssa and from Andrea. Alyssa.
Yeah, I think we're starting to get to a point where we're refining what it means to act on some of our goals when it comes to green goals, even within this conversation, and making sure that we're creating this new economy that we like. Some intervention points that are coming up are municipal and financial policy, employment, and how to retrain folks that are at risk being laid off in the municipal sector, and then procurement as well, and how to spend that money. I'm wondering if there are any other intervention points that you think are available to municipalities to actually create the economy. Like what sort of, where can you do direct action beyond just advocacy, and how can we support each other in that?
Right, because the municipalities cannot sort of set bonds and or post bonds, and that the money would flow in, be able to actually do that money spending or redirection at a municipal level, right? That's provincial and that's federal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we have tax deferral, but that has to be sorted out with the provincial government. We are somewhat limited. I mean, it's going to come down to, for a lot of municipalities, what do you not move forward with it, like forward with projects that were planned. We're running the modeling right now for what that looks like if we were to reduce or put off property tax collection, for example. Like, what does that do to us financially as an organization? But there are potentials too, I mean, we talk so much about share economy and like rethinking how we use public spaces. I mean, I've been trying to take over, hope there's no golfers on the line, but I'm like, golf courses, really? So there are so many opportunities, right, to reuse space, retrain people. Probably not as many tools as possibilities, but open to seeing what other people. I'm probably missing a lot of the tools. George is going to tell me what they all are after this call.
Yes, that's right. But that's a key point though too, is I mean, maybe that part of the sort of economic structure needs to be looking at how money, that we want to focus probably more focus on the local economies too, which is going to be the municipalities too. So maybe some of this thinking and some of this discussion and the writing of this needs to say that those kind of economic powers need to be down at the municipal level too, because everybody knows their area better, and the farther and farther you get away from the land or your municipality too, like, the federal government doesn't really have a good handle on what's happening here on the ground. It has an impression, but the farther and farther you get away from the land, people they somehow seem to lose that knowledge. So maybe that's a key point of thinking about this new economy too, is that we need to be thinking about that, to put more that more economic power in the hands of local municipalities, so you can focus on, because maybe you're one municipality that you want to, I don't know what, you want to have a whole forest of Lorax trees or whatever the heck, you want to come up with as an example. Well, nobody else is interested in that. But if you don't have the financial ability to make that a priority for your municipality, then how can you're not meeting the needs of your citizens and your local situation. And it doesn't mean anything to the province, or it doesn't mean anything to the feds, or the United Nations for that matter. So maybe that's something I'm thinking about, the world economy. So anyway, there's more people have their hands up here too. So Andrea was up next, I believe.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with Megan that I think ultimately the only thing that local governments can do is consider service reductions. And here on the Sunshine Coast, 40% of our property taxes go into recreation. We got 2 ice rinks and 3 pools, between 30,000 people. So at some point I'm feeling like, okay, well, when do we close one of the rinks, and when do we close 2 of the pools, just to give people a break. At the same time, we just passed a record $46 million budget, and are hiring 15 people because our infrastructure is falling apart. So where is that balance? There's one thing keeping water coming out of your taps, but then at the same time, people 40% are going to recreation. But what I think might work is if there's some sort of advocacy piece, and say where the local government maybe gets some sort of stimulus package from the provincial government to hand out to local businesses, that would probably be more useful than the provincial government trying to handle it all on their own. So I think our key role as local government representatives is to put the advocacy into play, and to be the sort of the eyes and ears on the ground as to who really needs the help, and what's going to save the most amount of jobs. But I don't think that money should be coming out of the local government coffers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, where does to get sort of the most bang for the buck, and to where does that money come from? Because then, and this is the whole game too, is that municipalities are dependent on the money that they're collecting in taxes, and the province, and similarly for the province too, and the federal government to that extent as well. But only the federal government realistically at that level has the ability to let's say print money in its boldest sense. So then everybody else has difficulties in printing money, let's say, or putting money into the economy unless you've got it. So now we're going to shut down our municipalities. We're going to lose funding, or we have to give. If we need people to make sure they've got money in their bank accounts, so we're going to give not require the taxes. But then that's self-defeating too, because with the municipality not having the tax revenue, then they can't keep providing the water and make sure the lights are on, and the sewers and those types of things. So yeah, it's a catch-22 that if you give everybody a break, then there's no money coming back in, and if you keep collecting it, then people are going to be in a worse situation than they are. So I know there's a huge conversation about this. So
one thing that we've just had a few brief conversations with a bunch of councillors is trying to identify infrastructure projects that will move to, forward a greener economy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and have that ready so that, say, for example, if the government, provincial and federal government, goes the route of printing money and then having a big grant program where they're, instead of building the infrastructure themselves, kind of what FDR did, send that to the municipalities, and the municipalities then contracts it out to local contractors, but build the things that we want. Our situation too in Nanaimo is that I think we're only using 8% of the 40% allowed of how much money we're allowed to borrow. And even though, it'd be ideal to get granting directly from the provincial government, right now the interest rates are so low that in terms of put some stimulus into our local economy would be to do some deficit financing and have these infrastructure projects borrow a bunch of money, and maybe we'll get lucky and there'll be programs later down the road to bring that money in through the senior levels of government to help with that. But that's what we're trying to do, is just identify the projects so that we're ready to go depending on what route, and really considering that deficit financing.
Right. And Ben, tell me the numbers again. I didn't quite catch them. I just want to make sure we got those clear. So you said we're only using 8% of 40%, did you say?
Oh, no, I think each municipality, at least in British Columbia, and I'm sorry I wasn't here at the start of the call to know where everybody's coming from, but in municipality, I think you're allowed to borrow up to 40% of your revenue. And, depending on sort of where your municipality is at, I think that ranges, in British Columbia, municipalities borrow as little as 6%, and there's some that are up at like 34%, depending. And Nanaimo's just in a situation where we haven't borrowed much money yet.
So that's a huge important. By doing that, we could get the local economy going. So I think that's hugely important, and I do agree that we need to learn from like the stuff that was happening in Canada and the US during the Great Depression too, that we could take a bunch of people that are now going to be unemployed. And then if we think about the sort of climate caucus umbrella and natural asset management, that we can start doing watershed restoration, all kinds of things by using that funding that we create, say the local municipality doing deficit financing, and then the central banks putting out that kind of money too to fund these kind of projects to start looking after those natural assets that we need to fix up here anyway, and then would create economy and create employment for people too that are now displaced from oil patches and all kinds of places. And economically, they say that in a recession, depression kind of situation, that's one of the best things that governments can do actually, is do this deficit financing and get the money into the economy and create these projects, create that employment. So I think that'd be a really good thing to look at. So hands up, and Alyssa's had her hand up for a while, and Ted too. Yeah, do you want to put your hand up on on the Zoom, please?
Yeah. So I just want to say, Ben, I love that idea, and to add to that, I think new ways for procuring those services and staffing those services, like having community employment agreements that target specific populations that are most impacted by this. It could even call out, if you've been retraining and employing people that have been laid off over the past 6 months, to make sure that it's an equitable distribution, that money is not being given to large corporations that are already profiting off COVID. One thing that I also will say is, I just put the request for information from the Government of Canada around how they're spending their money and what their needs are as far as response efforts. And I think, well, my assumption are that municipalities are not stopping spending altogether, but they might be shifting how they're spending. So maybe they're not spending money on rec centers, but they are employing more cleaning services, or helping deliver meals to seniors that were participating in their rec center programs prior, those types of things. So I guess I would encourage and invite you to brainstorm with me around what are some of those new purchases that you're already doing, and how can they be, I guess, more strategic from a sustainable perspective and from a social perspective, because I just assume that there is some spending that you guys are doing to address it, and I think that's a really big opportunity that we can take advantage of.
Good. And Corey has her hand up.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, just building off what you were saying, this is obviously kind of looking a little bit further down the line, moving past the immediate sort of bailouts and whatnot from provincial and federal. But as you spoke to about looking at the long term with regards to how are we investing back in communities and looking at where we can be receiving support and funding from the provincial government. And I wanted to touch on that natural assets piece that you said and what I spoke to earlier in the introductions. But this one of the opportunities that we see that we're looking at is around this watershed security fund that actually gives local people and local governments the power and resources to restore and manage those local water sources. And so, you know, we recognize that those water sources should be owned and managed by the people that know them best, which are local communities, and that through a fund that the province could invest into local communities, we can provide, you know, local people with the funding, the training, the authority to actually look after those water sources and kind of create a surge in jobs, like in rural communities. And I mean, ultimately, other than Vancouver and Victoria, no other rural communities have, or sorry, like the Lower Mainland have protected watersheds. And so there's a huge opportunity there to really empower local communities, I think, through funding and training to monitor and manage and restore those watersheds. And I mean, it'll be interesting to see coming out of the current situation around like how our rural economies particularly hit when it comes to some of the, you know, resource extraction challenges that are happening. And if we're wanting to move forward to be more climate resilient, I think this is an opportunity for local communities to look at how are we supporting those community members that perhaps are losing their jobs, being laid off, to transition them into new opportunities around clean technology, the blue economy, which is something I think important for us to be thinking about in BC, and again, restoration work and just transitioning people into utilizing often the skills that they have and just applying them in a new way. And there's lots of examples, I think, where there's funds like this that have happened in the province that could, again, be redirected, specifically looking at our watersheds. And there's so much work out there around the value that natural assets, protecting natural assets in our community could have in supporting us in these transition times from a financial perspective.
Yeah, that's really good. And that municipalities natural asset initiative, I think, is something to go look at as well too. So yep. Ben has George has his hand up, and I also see Megan too. So I don't know who was first, but
I think Ted's actually before me. Ted, if you want to go.
Okay, sure. And maybe if you can also put your hand up, that little icon comes up on the screen, and I can see that. That would be handy too. Okay, Megan, go ahead.
Sorry, I think it was Ted, actually.
I think it might be me, Eric. And sorry, this is the second.
Go ahead.
This is the second time now that I don't have a hand option except for these little 5 digits right here. So apologies for that. And I'll be real quick because we're running out of time and other people want to talk. So number one, we're all creatures of habit, and that is unquestionable. And if we don't take the phoenix out of this opportunity and rise in a different kind of a framework, we'll go back to business as usual, because business as usual, status quo, creatures of habit, all of that stuff is all one and the same. So there's a really a golden opportunity here. Also related to that, there's frameworks that have climate change front and center, but also talk about things like local economy, food security, and all that sort of thing. Green New Deal, One Planet Living, Sustainable Development Goals, Eco-City Standards, etc. And all can be applied and/or are being applied at the local government level. Secondly, in terms of local, cities are the cities are the consumers of the world, right? And whether you take FCM's 50% control and/or influence and/or C40's 70%, we have local governments have a lot of influence on what we're trying to do, and this is a federal government platform, presumably as well, notwithstanding some 15 billion that might go to the oil giants. And on that note, that's kind of a theme of moving down to local. So green infrastructure, absolutely, around transportation, renewables, low interest rates. Renewables win over oil and gas every time, because all they're concerned about is the capital, primarily the capital up front, along with the local training and the local jobs that are concomitant to that, as opposed to big. Speaking of big and small, Van City, Coast Capital, credit unions, etc., they're all about the community, they're all about local, and you can bet neither one of them are like Royal Bank, RBC, what are the big three? RBC, Scotia, and I think CIBC are 3 of the top 10 banks in the world that are the biggest investors into oil and gas. And that's quite embarrassing from a Canadian perspective. M&AI, you guys have talked about that. Absolutely, local resources, some modest funding either from your own budgets or augmenting that can help ecosystem retention as well as co-joining with food and related agriculture and food security. So maybe I better leave it there, but money, somebody mentioned green infrastructure related federal, provincial, and related monies coming into local green infrastructure. Absolutely, and there's lots of ways to provide, incentivize that, from PACE with local building energy, air source heat pumps, So thanks for all of that. I agree with, I think, everything I've heard on the panel today.
Good. So we can go a little bit longer if people have more to talk about too. I don't think we're necessarily limited to an hour, but we probably should wrap it up soonish. But does anybody have any other thoughts about, say, new Green Deal or what a new economy could look like? Would it be sort of a hybrid or something like that? So George, you got your hand up there. What do you think?
Well, it's a little bit related to that, but also building off of Corey's point previously about the watershed security fund. I think one of the big questions that's beholden upon us as people working at the local level is, what are the new types of structures we can build that are even currently within our jurisdiction? So the idea of watershed security funds, local economic development corporations. I think it was Ben mentioning the various powers around debt loads that are powers and restraints that are available to municipalities. All of those can shape some of the things that we can do together right out of the gate. Some cities in Canada do have their own economic development corporations. Vancouver has an agency, Surrey has the corporation, others have corporations. Nelson has its own electricity utility, same ditto for New Westminster, et cetera, et cetera. Many of those are things that we can pick up today that are tools that we have in the toolbox right out of the gate. The question is, how are they funded? How are they resourced to go and do the work that they need to do? So I don't have an answer to that, but that's, I think, as far as what are some of the things that we pick up relatively quickly that we can get action on. I think understanding that there are a variety of those existing vehicles, tools, institution types that are available, particularly utilities, local economic development corporations, and other intermunicipal types of arrangements. There's a lot of interesting stuff that can be done there. So I would just encourage folks to keep those in their mind as we think about the response.
Right, so vehicles that have wheels on right now that can start rolling, as opposed to inventing something new and having to build the car and then start taking it on the road. Adam, you got a point there.
I just wrote up, but I would point out that it's been demonstrated that by investing in the natural resources for water, for flood protection, actually can be cost effective compared to the man-made solutions. And I know time is short, but I think that's a whole area that's worth remembering.
Right, like we've been having a discussion with this at a community and watershed technical advisory committee for the Caucus Valley Regional District, is that in that whole process, we have a new service that was voted in by the public in 2018 that said it was going to be a drinking water and watershed protection program. So at the very last minute, we included watershed restoration, and people were going to throw it out the door. And I said, well, this is just nuts, because by doing things like watershed restoration, looking after those natural assets, we will actually be paying a small amount for an ounce of prevention to give us a pound of cure, because all this other stuff, the big costs of protecting against flooding and raising levees and pumping systems, we aren't going to have the billions to spend to fix the symptoms. But if we did the prevention part in the front end, then we could spend a little bit there and maximize the value for what we're actually doing there. So that's totally to your point there, Adam, is that those big infrastructure projects, some of them we're going to have to do, but the problem is this restoration and looking after the natural assets is going to be our most smartest investment long-term, well, short, medium, and long-term, so that we're not paying billions. We're not wasting money, literally spending billions on trying to put up seawalls or pumping stations or raising levees to fight flooding. And this is one of the things we have to actually focus on. So so there's some really good, looks like some alliance, but is there anything else we want to talk about, or are we probably good for today? What do we think?
I just had a quick question. It's Megan.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
If anyone has any, I think that economic modeling would be really helpful. I mean, I have challenges of actually getting projects when you talk about green versus gray infrastructure. You know, you're usually looking at someone that's like, okay, yeah, someday kind of thing. And then you know that there are these economic, environmental, social benefits to doing things differently. So I don't know if anyone just has any resources that they want to drop in chat about local economies versus, I mean, we're seeing it in action right now in our communities, because we are retooling. Like, we have, you know, restaurants completely switching their business model within a week. And like, people are realizing how incredibly important local having access to food and things that are necessary locally is so important. So if anyone knows an economist that's done some interesting modeling, I just think to be able to show if that bailout that's going to big oil was invested locally, what the different communities would look like. I think that's what we all sort of intuitively feel and know. But it would be interesting to, if anyone has any resources, let me know.
Right, and to see where did that money go, and very likely that oil patch stuff just went into the revenue and then right into the management in there, and the bonuses and all that kind of silliness. Like it'll never make it to the local economy. That's a very good question though, Megan, is where did that money go, and were there actually any local benefits? And my guess is that there aren't going to be any local benefits at all. Yeah. Okay, so that's good. So any other questions that we can definitely follow this up, and then going through Nudge as well too, that lets people do email back and forth, but I mean, we got to look at things like the Green New Deal, learn from things like FDR and what was done here in Canada too, and to start getting the possibilities of funding at the local level and tap into these other pots of money that are going to be coming down, but starting those conversations and looking at natural assets and trying to retrain people and get out there and do these big projects and using the sort of three avenues that oh shoot, Vancouver, he mentioned that there's those three possibilities. George, right? So George, that he mentioned the three avenues right now where we can get funding going and working at the municipal level to get these projects going. So yeah, I think that's good. I think that's a really good discussion, and there'll be much more discussions about new economies. Anything in closing?
Just a quick question, Eric.
Yep.
Will we put together a working group to capture this or to manage this and nudge? Otherwise,
it's going to fall by the wayside. So I would suggest that probably some kind of working group is going to have to be created with that, and maybe I'll chat with Rick about that too. But this has got to be one of the discussions under the climate caucus here too, about this sort of the new economy, and maybe it's a green economy, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here from a climate perspective, which then has all kinds of economic benefits as well, I think. So yeah, what is a 21st century economy? What's a green economy, and to help us really diversify and get an equitable and that we have social justice and environmental justice out there. That what's that new economy look like? So I think a working group under Nudge would be probably what's going to be required. Yeah.
Well, I did take some notes and under Nudge, so.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because I just been
where I post it. That's
my one screen, and my typing ability was limited here because I can't. My monitors. I got two monitors, and the other one is working weirdly. So thank you very much, Adam.
Offline. So
yeah. Anybody else have any closing thoughts?
Just a brass tacks. Can you download chats so that you keep that? So
yeah.
when
There's
Can someone tell me how to do that?
triple dots just to the lower right if you're on a computer. Next to file, you see file and triple dots. If you click on that, it does a save chat.
It'll save the whole chat, eh? Oh, I see. And where does it save it to?
Your documents, if it's a Mac, I don't know on a PC where it would go.
Okay, okay. Wow, good. Okay, and then also I've recorded this conversation as well, so then this is sent up to the cloud, so we'll have this this whole recording then. So, okay, well that's good. I think we can wrap that up, and that's great. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, you guys. Someone called me and it went anyway. I missed that, but there is a way, and so thank you. I screenshotted it, and when I figure it out.
Oh, Megan, Adam, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, just look at the lower right-hand corner of the chat. There are 3 dots. You click on that, and you see a save chat.
Ah, awesome. Thank you so much.
Good. Okay, thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.